Hello, and welcome back to Dev Game Club, a weekly podcast in which two veteran game developers look at games from the past to discuss their relevance and impact today. I'm Brett Duville, and I'm joined as always by my co-host, a man who is overcome with disillusionment because he killed my associate.
Tim Longo. There are so many good lines from this last section.
There really were.
Just the back and forth between Leon and Sadler, and just like, what are you? Who wrote this? It's like they lean into the campiness way more than I thought they would. I don't remember that being that bad in one, but yeah. I guess you didn't talk to the villains as much in one, so. Right. But
this has a lot of cutscenes, right? I mean, where you're, and it's not just all through the text in the background and and notes and things like that, though it also has that. You actually have, full on, cutscenes and, characters. And I mean, I guess you've got the, what is it called again? The radio,
the
codec, right? That also, goes that way. So it's just a whole thing.
Mm-hmm. It's a cheap way to. I still, we're maybe jumping in too quickly to one of the topics, but I might be biased, but I just see a lot of Metal Gear influence here in this game. Even especially this last section, not just the location, but the helicopter sequence, and there's a lot of like set piecey kind of stuff that is sort of semi-interactive, but sort of some of the failings of the Metal Gear series too. And then there is a lot of talking to villains, and the villains are really sort of the cornerstone of each chapter, and they're built up, and you talk to them a lot, and then I don't know.
It feels like they're also spending a lot of time here tying it back to the larger Resident Evil mythology in a way that they really haven't.
Yeah.
Because at the beginning, it's basically like Umbrella has crumbled, blah, blah, blah. Ada Wong shows up, but you really don't know what her story is and why she's there really until the very end. Although you do kind of get these glimpses because they're talking about this other fly in the ointment or whether the other monkey in the ranch hands. So you've got like these questions of, she's meddling, but why? And of course you ultimately get that.
There's intrigue, right?
Yeah,
it's like, it's almost like spy stuff, right? Which is very Metal Gear. And then Krauser himself, I think, is a very Metal Gear villain, right? It's until the very end, but yeah.
Right. Yeah, he's got that whole until he ties way back into RE land, but he definitely has that he's got his military attitude and his you crossed me or whatever, like he's got his his axe to grind and all of that. And then through this, of course, all of that you've got threaded, like you've got this huge island base as well, which sort of feels Metal Gear. It feels a little bit like Metal Gear 2, right? With I forgot that Shadow Moses thing.
Shadow Moses. Yeah.
Is that the first one or the second one? I forget what the second one's called.
The
first one, I guess. But then the second one is like some weird reconstruction of it or something. Those stories.
Yeah, the second one's cloudy for me, but yeah.
Yeah. It's like all encased in those girders that are sticking up out of the ocean. It's very strange.
Yeah, outer heaven.
Yeah. That's it. Yeah. So I mean, it just has a lot of hallmarks of all of that stuff. So I don't disagree with you. Plus this huge helicopter section. Although the helicopter's on your side, it is taken down the same way that Snake takes it down, more or less. And he yells out, "Mike!" And you're like, who's Mike?
Yeah, Mike with the New York accent.
Yeah.
And he's like, "Let's go for some beers."
I'm buying.
Yeah, so funny.
Yeah. It's very campy at that point. It's almost self-parody. When it's
they felt
into its bigger world, the bigger Resident Evil world.
I mean, it felt like they were self-aware, which was good, right? That they definitely know. I mean, there's a lot of bad jokes and a lot of inappropriate jokes, especially at the end.
Oh yeah,
but but it, they were definitely leaning into it. While one, for instance, comparing it to one, which was, fairly self-serious, and I don't remember much camp at all. Though it was campy, they didn't lean into it that way. So maybe that's something that they just kind of became self-aware with, which is good. But I think in pre-show we were talking about it too. Though there is this sort of, I feel like I can see some meeting someplace saying that Metal Gear is doing really well for Konami, being major competitor to Capcom, and Metal Gear 2 would have been out by now, right? And maybe 3 maybe as well.
I think 3 was a little later. I'll look.
Yeah, but anyway.
No, you're right. 3 was 2004. That's a lot earlier than I thought. That's right. It's a PS2 game. I always forget it's a PS2
at its
game.
prime, like it was probably really really getting there, and so I could see some of that.
3 is quite good actually. I quite liked 3.
I think it's actually the best one, to be honest.
Yeah.
But then but also kind of I was thinking about this topic and kind of remembering back to RE1 that there is that sort of concept of getting deep below the mansion, where there are sort of the umbrella aspects come out, and there's a I think there's a lab or something. There's sort of like the high tech stuff is revealed as a sort of surprise below this
right,
old
and
mansion.
you get that big the Nemesis creature.
Oh yeah, the Nemesis, right? That's right. Yep, there's that fight.
So
and there's rocket launcher.
you even have that sort of like sudden level of difficulty change, like something that's unbeatable without just crazy overpowered weapons, and you sort of get that here to kind of bring it back a little bit to some of the more systemic topics. You have that here in that enemy with that you need to use the scope for, which is a sort of it's rough audio. He's pretty creepy.
He's creepy.
I noted on Twitter that it's basically the same gameplay for him as Killer 7's gameplay, which I don't know that you've ever played.
No, I don't think I did.
Killer 7, the creatures are very similar actually in look. They're a little bit, they have this jagged smile. I think that might even be what it's called, but there's like some smile that they have, but you basically put on a scope and you can see where the points are. You can hit them, or maybe it's just an input thing. I can't remember exactly because I haven't played it in a decade and a half. But that was one of the Capcom 5, and same engine too. So it's like, oh, they just took the gameplay of this one creature and built the whole game around it, and did the really madcap, grasshopper type stuff or Suda type stuff. I can't remember if it was grasshopper or not, but yeah, so it's really funny seeing that creature and being like, oh yeah, they just made a whole game around this one type of creature, basically. I mean, variations on it and putting the placements in different places, but very, very similar gameplay. And to the point where it gets very boring. If Killer 7, if it weren't for the totally out there story, the combat would not be drawing you through, because you're like, okay, another one. Click, bang, bang. Like, I've seen this one. I know exactly where to shoot. It gets very muscle memory. Whereas here, there's only a few of them, and so they're extremely threatening.
Yeah. There's a Killer 7 weapon in this game. Is that a reference?
I'm sure it is. Yeah. I didn't even pick up on that. Of course it is.
There's a pistol that you can buy late in the game that's called Killer 7.
There you go. There you go.
I don't remember what its advantage is. Highly stable or something, but... Yeah. So it's of the era. You can see
that's really inappropriate as a description, because if anything, Killer 7 is highly unstable.
Oh yeah, fair enough. That Killer 7 is the character. Is that the character?
Yeah, he's got 7. He's 7 characters. He's 7 personalities.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that was the shtick. Okay.
Yeah, it's a whole. Okay. It's a whole thing. One of them's in a wheelchair. Whenever one of them dies, you come back as a bag of meat that's like next to the guy in the wheelchair or something. It's extremely bizarre.
Whoa.
It's a very
sounds like Suda.
Game. Yep. It's very entertaining for that. There's like an anime chapter, which is like an anime. It's just an animation in the middle of the game. It's wild. It is quite a game. Someday I'll play it again, but. Anyway,
well.
So what are the other enemy types that we run into here that are new? That the Gatling gun guy might be new.
Yeah, the Gatling gun guy. There's the stun rod guy.
Right, the stun rod guys. Mm-hmm.
And mainly, I think my point on the enemy variety is that they're just, as they should by the end of the game. They're basically, when it comes to the main zombies, the foot soldiers, you have all of the variety plus a couple extras are thrown in now. There's also the bigger guys with the armor plating that are sort of like a middle ground between a
right, where you have to shoot their legs. They're sort of like the guys with the shields in that they've got a little bit more armor, but it's more placement based than kind of punching through it based. There's those two for sure.
And they look like Mad Max kind of road warrior kind of guys. So I feel like the reason I brought that one up is, when you get to some of the small arenas, the variety of zombies that they're throwing, those guys, the Granado or whatever they're called, in one room potentially, and also the audio design's quite good for them. So, you can hear, they have a lot of good telegraphing for each of them. So, you hear the static from the stun rods, you hear the guys with the shields, and you don't have to see any of them. You can just know that like 5 different guys are coming my way. There's I think they even have audio for like the crossbow guys too somehow. I feel like I can recognize if a crossbow guy is loading his crossbow or something, even if he's off screen. Yes. So it's just
they definitely have an audio cue as well. Yeah, there was one place where I'm like, I know they're here. Like, I'm very worried about going out this door. It's actually really near the beginning. Once you get into that second area, I'm like, oh no, I know they're here, but I can't. I don't know if they're chanting maybe. And I knew they were there, and I'm just like, oh man, I don't want to go out in the open. Of course, as soon as I stepped into the open, thunk, and I'm like, God, I knew it. A little unfair as far as that went. I couldn't find an angle where I could see them. But this is a section where I very rarely died. I think the one room that I had real challenges with was once I had Ashley again, the room where you have to go in and use the wrecking ball to break the wall.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think I died there once. Yeah.
Managing her in there was very difficult. I had her wait for a while. I'm like, I'll just run over there and I'll do it. But then of course somebody picked her up, and then I accidentally shot twice, so one fell and the second one I killed her with my bullets. So I'd have her do it, and then, and it turned out the best thing to do there was just run as fast as you could to get into that room with her, and then just do it yourself multiple times and then shoot a path out. I was making it way more complicated than it needed to be. Though it was fun to shoot the guys into the lava and stuff like that. But
yeah. I mean, the funny thing about that is I didn't even pick up on the fact that you could do it before the combat was over. So I just killed everything and then just.
Do they eventually run out? I was starting to feel like, they're. Oh, okay.
That's what
that I didn't expect. I didn't expect that. I just assumed it was like they're just going to keep sending him. So I just did it as quickly as I could, which also worked out. So it was actually fairly easy once I did that. It was all the other stuff that was like, oh, this isn't really working. I tried to have her stay behind in the tunnel, but once you went into the room, she's in the cutscene, and so they move her basically, and you're like, oh, well, now she's staying, but she's staying in the room. I didn't even realize it until I had crossed the room and was looking back. I was like, oh no, she's standing right there. And of course somebody grabbed her. So
yeah. Well, plus also eventually people come from up there. So I put her up there at one time too, but then they just came. Well, they also climb up there to get her. So anyway, I mean, so I didn't see the switch or whatever. So I thought it was, I basically just killed everything and then just went over and hit the switch 3 times, which was irritating because you have to wait, but nothing's happening. Right. So, but it was fun to, they reused sort of the lava concept, which is, kind of harkens back to the El Gigantes and stuff. So, there's some good theming there going on there where they're using all of their tricks, etc., in level design and enemy design. So that was fun. Let's see, what's was the infrared scope optional? I don't think you had to pick it up, right? Which would have been pretty hard.
I don't think you have to kill any of those things.
Yeah, yeah.
I think you can just run past them all the time, though it is, in a lot of cases, they're
tricky.
like blocking you and would be pretty difficult. You might have to backtrack a little way, kite them away a little bit to get some space. You can just kind of get by them as long as you time it with their spikes. Yeah. So, I feel like it's, because I definitely did at times where I was like, oh, I don't want to waste ammo on this thing. I just got to get through that door over there, and I just would dash past them. But once I had Ashley, I felt a lot more like I had to really protect her to shoot that thing, so that was the kind of trick there that I was balancing, like, well, I don't know, I can get by them, but will she get by them is the question, and so I didn't even want to really test it. This was also a good chunk of time. I mean, it was at least 5 hours for me. So yeah, you must have been up pretty late, finishing this off.
Yeah, I played 3 of the 4 chapters on Saturday, and then 1 chapter in the final chapter last night. So luckily, I wouldn't have survived if I had done it all.
Yeah, I was gonna say no way you would have made it going all at once. Okay.
No, yeah, thanks for letting me know that how long it took you, because I definitely planned ahead for that. I had a great moment early in the chapter, probably 1 or 2. Or in the section where I shot a rocket out of the sky that was shot at me, and then after that, I shot a dynamite that was thrown at me. It felt so amazing, because I have my fully upgraded my red 9, red 6, red 9, red 9, and the riot gun, which we didn't talk about in pre-show, but it unlocks the extra damage thing for I guess probably any weapon that you fully upgrade, which I didn't know about. So that was kind of a nice. So I did save the money to upgrade both of them. So by the final boss, I had both of those fully upgraded with the extra damage boost thing.
I think I just had the shotgun all the way. I can't remember if I did the Punisher or not, but I almost had enough to get the semi-auto all the way. So the semi-auto had been fully upgraded and just had the final customization or whatever, the big expensive one that was like 100,000 or something. Mm-hmm. I had 70 and I'm like, I can't get there. Like I was looking through my gear. I'm like, I just can't get there. So it was a whole thing for sure.
I did combine with the cat at the end, the treasure that we talked about last episode. I did combine. I found 2 of the gems.
I also found 2 and not 3. So I sold it for whatever, $25,000.
Where that third one is.
I wonder.
Actually, there's one spot that I missed. There's one treasure I missed. I wonder if that was it. Anyway, go ahead.
I don't feel like I missed any treasures in this section. I bought the map and I'm like, I don't think I missed anything, but maybe it's possible. I got 2 as well. And I wondered if actually there are more treasures in the harder difficulty. So that you have this opportunity in the harder difficulty to pay these things off. I don't know that. I just wonder. And maybe somebody can write in if they know whether that works out. We get a lot of good feedback on that stuff, which I'm just going to start doing that with every game. Like, hey, we're not going to play this in the depth that you have, so please just tell us if we have questions, because it's turned out to be a good way to interact with folks and get their expertise in here as well. Because there's no way we have the time to play these games.
Or research them, right? I mean, we could read guides and stuff, but it's like, it's in a way we don't want to go about it that way. We just want our experience to be our experience, but to have questions and be able to get them answered is just great. And I love the crowdsourcing aspect of that. So I'd rather have the interaction than to have the question and then just go look it up. Because normally people have also like their thoughts about that, like it's really cool because or whatever. So it's fun. So we'll keep doing that. So the other thing that happened to you this section, and me too, was that, and we'll kind of go into a bunch of set pieces after this because there's a ton of sequences and set pieces and tying in all that story stuff that we've already alluded to. But I definitely felt ammo poor
you know, I had 3 main weapons: the shotgun, the Punisher, and the semi-auto. I never bought any upgraded anything, like any of the better weapons. I just kept upgrading the ones I had so that I just like maxed out all of those things.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I did.
So,
I just
for
did
instance,
totally
you mean like
strategy.
the riot gun? You didn't get the riot gun.
I didn't get the riot gun.
Yeah,
I didn't get the assault shotgun or whatever that one was called. There's maybe a tactical shotgun. I did buy the tactical vest, which I sort of regretted. I felt like I would have rather have upgraded the semi-auto further. I never bought the first rifle, so when the semi-auto rifle came along, I bought that instead. So that's what I was going
to say, because the semi-auto was
I basically skipped a level of that gun because I had tried to use the base rifle, in the tram section when I was playing on the Wii, but effectively the GameCube, backwards compatible, and I was like, I don't know about the rifle for me, you know, but then later I was like, ooh, but a semi-auto rifle, maybe that would be better. And turns out I really was happy I had it because of the infrared scope. But yeah, I was constantly switching between all of those because I was running out of ammo. Constantly. I felt like I was very low all the time, in a not unpleasant way. And I never completely ran out. There was a point where I considered getting the Magnum just because I had a bunch of Magnum bullets. I was like, maybe I need to tap into this ammo source as well, but I ended up not, and was fine. What was it like for you?
I think I found a Magnum at some point. I don't think I bought it. I feel like I found one or something. And I didn't upgrade it at all. Because I just wanted the bullets. But yeah, I mean, it definitely wasn't, I think it was appropriate for the game, and I think it was good. I still felt like the game was fun, even though there was so much ammo loss. I guess I was just surprised at the spike being so high, or low rather. Meaning I was really doing my best to conserve it throughout the rest of the game, and felt like I was succeeding at doing that. So I generally was pretty ammo rich when I needed. I was still switching between weapons, all the different ammo types for sure, but I felt like I had what I needed when I wanted it. But in this last section, I'm trying to think back of sort of, maybe it's just number of enemies or what it was, but how so much ammo was being depleted. Maybe it was the bosses.
Yeah,
because
for me, it was
bosses?
that centaur, the 4-legged burrowing underground thing, you know, where I spent a lot of ammo on that thing because you're trapped in a tight space with it, and you have to kind of like chase it off with damage. In those, if you can't get by it, which in a couple cases I couldn't. So I felt like I used a lot of shotgun ammo in particular in there. Plus, you have to shoot the lights, you know, or whatever to open up gateways. And so like I was, you know, and that's not always super precise. So I felt like I was burning a lot there. And then, so that's definitely a place where I did, you know, but also, you know, like my rifle rounds, it took me a while to get good at those, those things that were just kind of relentless, to hit those at all and puncture their, you know, targets. I mean, probably took me twice as many bullets as I needed if I had hit them all perfectly, at least the first time, you know, first couple times I fought them. So that was depleting ammo. So there were a lot of different sort of things that were contributing to that. I try to line up Punisher shots so that I could get two guys through, you know, through and through, but you know, it's not always possible depending on the space. So there's just a lot of factors, you know, especially in that helicopter section where they were kind of all spread out, and like I was just constantly running into one, you know, like, oh, now there's one behind me. Oh, now I'm down on the lower level and there's one over there behind a turret, and there's one over here behind a turret, and then there's others milling about, or there's one up there. Like there's just like, there wasn't concentrations of them where it would have been helpful to use the Punisher. And, you know, I ran through a lot of ammo probably in that section as well. So, you know, despite Mike's ample efforts to help me out.
Yeah, I didn't quite understand the pacing and sort of triggering of the it was cool sequence, and there was a lot of fantasy fulfillment within the cinematics, unfortunately, right? Which was definitely a thing of the era, which we always complained about, of like, I should be the one, right, laying waste, not watching this pilot do it. But the logic of sort of like when he would blow stuff up and how long it would take him, and it seemed to be triggered in certain ways, and I didn't quite understand that. It was fairly confusing area, but from a production value perspective, good. The interesting thing about the ammo constraint aspect, which dawned on me way too late for things like the submachine gun or what have you, is that
oh, right, the TMP is the other weapon I had, so I actually had 4 weapons I was upgrading.
Yeah, and it's like how critical. I was trying to save money to upgrade and focus on just a couple, which is basically the shotgun and the red 9. But it kind of dawned on me that because ammo is so important, it's really important to try to upgrade the damage on any weapon you have or that you're using, because it makes every shot you fire so much more valuable. Yeah. And I didn't do that with the TMP, the TMP I was using as well, because I obviously had all the ammo, and I would use it largely for like, shooting guys in the knee and things like that. So I wasn't really worried about ammo as much. But late game, when I was out of shotgun shells and out of, handgun, shells, I was like, well, man, I got to make these TMPs count. So, I shifted to upgrading everything that I had, at least for the damage. So it's just an interesting concept that I hadn't really thought about for a Resident Evil game. And of course, that wasn't something in the previous game. So in one at least. So that was kind of nice to have that decision, to essentially make ammo, which we already know in a survival horror game is a trope of a survival horror. Ammo is a constrained resource that is very valuable. And that's how they build, partially how they build tension in the balancing of the game. But in this game, you have the option to make the ammo that you have more powerful. And so that's an interesting sort of tension. They might auto balance that behind the scenes, which would be a little crappy if they did, because you're spending so much money on that stuff. But
I mean, it's my suspicion though, because if you're just playing it through, we both had this feeling of being ammo constrained, but having enough, right? And it's, even though we had to switch between weapons a bunch and all that stuff, I can totally imagine.
So you're saying because we upgraded, they gave that's why we're ammo constrained?
No, I'm saying that everybody is ammo constrained, whether you upgrade or not.
Got it.
They're just balancing towards forcing a feeling, right? And the feeling is I'm running out of ammo and I don't know what's coming up next. I just had this boss battle. I'm almost out of ammo. And then you come into a room with a bunch of things. And you're like, oh man, I don't have very much ammo. And you're in that, like, I've got to conserve it. And probably your bullets are doing more damage at that point, right? You're getting more luck. I also got a hint from somebody. I think it was from email. In fact, it might be an email I read tonight. Might have been in a PS or something, but that the flash grenades. Did you find the flash grenade thing?
The flash grenade thing. What do you mean?
Yeah. So if the parasite pops the head and that they're up out of the head, the flash grenade insta kills them.
Oh. Why is that?
If the parasite comes out of the head, they lived underground. They're sensitive to light.
Oh, huh. That's okay.
Question mark. Right. It was kind of. I didn't.
They're parasites.
Yeah. So we should have just gone in there with a Kodachrome, big flash bulb,
right,
like in Fatal Frame. So. Yeah, I was
surprised. So I'm clear. You're saying that
you shoot the head.
Whether I was going back.
Okay.
Going back to the balancing. You're saying from an auto balancing perspective, no matter how much you've upgraded, you're still going to feel ammo constrained at the end.
I suspect so, because otherwise. Like if you're not hunting down all those treasures, which I can't imagine every player does, you're not going to get through the end of that game.
Yeah, maybe
you just won't have the
fewer
money.
Enemies. I don't know. It just feels I mean, I get it from a balancing perspective.
Or they just punch up the damage on everybody regardless. Like, you know, or they lower the hit points on enemies. Like whatever.
Yeah. I mean, I can totally, from a development standpoint, I can totally see them doing it. From a player standpoint, like
you wouldn't want to know.
But you'd know if you. Somebody better answer this, but yeah, playing. I mean,
if you play it again, exactly, yeah. But I mean, I think the thinking is you play a second time, you play on professional, right?
Yeah,
you play on the next level of difficulty.
It just takes the RPG out of it, you know. It just bums me out, I guess, if that's the case. So all that being said, though, the Red 9 fully upgraded,
like I said, it's purely a theory. Like I have no actual like confirmation of that, but I can also just see it. Like we both had this experience. Yeah. Like, have they tuned it to the experience where you've upgraded a bunch of weapons? Like, I think I had the TMP fully upgraded as well. Maybe not the final customization, but everything else. Like, so I had basically 4 weapons that were fully customized and at least one that was taking the extra mile. Where it was like the shotgun, it was basically, it does the same damage regardless of the distance, which was like, oh, that's cool. I can shoot my shotgun from any distance and do shotgun blast damage. I like it. And we both ended up in the same place where we felt kind of resource constrained. And I'm just like, I don't know. Like you and I scoured the maps and found all the stuff. Maybe that's just the expectation of how you play. Maybe it is just too difficult if you don't do that. But if you can't go back, you know, there are chapters. You just can't go back from the end of chapter 4, right? You can't go back to the town once you get to the castle, right? Like we talked about last week. So it'd be hard to imagine that they haven't done some tuning that way.
Yeah, they'd have to. Yeah. I mean, on the flip side, it could be enemy based. I could see them maybe just eliminating. They could do the simplest thing they might be able to do is maybe have lower the enemy count if you haven't upgraded weapons. But that Red 9, fully upgraded Red 9 with the magical damage boost, I was basically I think I could shoot them twice in the knee and they'd be dead. So it felt very powerful in that regard, but it could just be more enemies or something, or damage. Anyway, it's fascinating. It'd be interesting to know how they did it. Tricky,
for my
very
part,
tricky.
I kind of don't care, right? I mean, like I had the tension, but it's only now talking to you that I'm like, did they manufacture that tension? Like, good on them from my perspective. Like, smoke and mirrors, we talk about it all the time. Like, I don't know how they achieved it, but we both had a very similar experience that feels like the designed experience, like that's what they wanted to happen.
Yeah.
And that it would not be possible to achieve for all players, because players who don't hunt for everything are just going to be, but maybe they're just out of luck. Maybe those players just can't win. That would be bad, though. That would be worse.
that would be worse. That'd be worse for sure. Yeah.
I wouldn't want to be 16 hours in and going, man, I just can't get by this boss. Like,
yeah. Auto leveling. Yeah.
I do know that it does some stuff, I think, based on how often you die, as well. I know that I believe is a fact. So, that it basically balances for you based on how many times you're dying, and uses that as a metric. So things become easier the more frequently you die. So maybe that just pushes enough as well to get you to the point where this is sort of happening too. So that's another possibility. So you always have the knife too.
Well, that was sort of like, that was my assumption about how they always get around this problem, is they give you opportunities like that, which are really difficult, but you're right. I mean, you don't want to put in a return for players like that. So it is a super tricky thing, but I mean, it'll come back up in my takeaways, but it's pretty impressive as far as the balancing achievement goes.
For sure. Let's talk. You had mentioned a QTE that you found that you wanted to specifically discuss, and we didn't talk about it pre-show, so I'm not sure which one it is. And then I guess we can just kind of talk about, we've touched on the war zone, but we have a number of other sort of boss battles and sequences of various
yeah.
kinds that we can talk about. So.
No, I think in pre-show I think I was just talking about how QTE heavy the chapter 5 was.
Okay.
Yeah. Because I feel like every major sequence
has
in
something.
This section has something. And for me, which I assume is the same for you, it's really just the two. For me, it's press X and A at the same time, and then it's the shoulder
X and
buttons.
Square.
X
buttons. And square for me, and the L2 R2 were the ones for me. Together. Yeah. And it was that. Yeah, just tons of dodging. The Krauser fight was that way. The first one with the knives was very like, he would kind of punctuate, and just the way the camera would kind of focus in on him for a moment would sort of telegraph it's coming, be ready. Though I did fail once in that section.
Not great though. Yeah, I mean it's just not. It's the game's not built for it. It feels this. The reason I bring it up is for this chapter, it feels like in the previous chapters when they had it, it felt more QTE, kind of like tropey as far as like the trend of the time. But for this last chapter, it felt much more like they were replacing QTEs with what they wanted to do mechanically, because they didn't have dodges. They didn't, they didn't have a rich mechanical.
I have an even more cynical approach to that, which is like, no, you're going to hear our exposition. This is not going to be a skippable cutscene, because in the middle you're going to have to input stuff. That's why you can't skip it.
Probably. Yeah, that could have been an aspect too. But I'm even talking about like when you're fighting him in the boss battles, right? Or when you are in the final one, when there's girders being thrown at you or whatever, right? It's like that should just be a dodge, right? But they don't have a dodge, so they're like, well, we could QTE our way through this. Like, oh, okay, and it looks more to your point on the sort of like ham-fistedness of it. There's also, it allows them to camera switch and show a more dramatic camera, but for doing it, so it does give them the sort of authorship to be able to control the situation a little bit more, but it's not fun. It's not mechanically fun, and it's actually fairly frustrating, because if you don't see it coming, or you're not super aware, then you kind of you're going to take damage.
No, that's a good point. I mean, it does. I do think that there's something to sort of the action movie framing. I mean, it's definitely the era where we're like, if you want to make movies, just go to Hollywood, and there was some actually bleeding back the other way starting to happen as well. I think that that's one of the things we probably talked about with respect to Metal Gear Solid, was that it was a fairly cinematic game in terms of, how it took camera usage and all of that, as well as having a lot of cinematics, but even in its action sequences was really trying to find ways to do that, and something that Kojima has always done. And I feel like this game is not doing it, like you point out, is kind of not doing it in this interesting systemic way. It's just kind of like, oh, well, you're going to hit these buttons, so we can camera cut to show you hit the buttons, but now we know exactly where you are, so we can show the cool dive roll or whatever. So I would tend to agree. And you're right. There was a lot of that incorporated into the mechanics of the fights.
A lot of dodging, basically, right?
A lot of dodging.
And,
it's no Dark Souls, where it's just a button. Here's your dodge button.
Exactly. Well, it's ironic, because it's a game that would be worse if it had a dodge from the rest of the game, because it's a survival horror game where another preview to my takeaways is, as far as like that tension that they build within the way that the mechanics do work. If you were much more mobile and running around and dodging and jinking and doing all kinds of stuff that action games do in that sense, then it wouldn't feel the same at all. So they kind of were trying to. My
solution would be just have it be the one button. It's just the press X to look cool button. Instead of making it a skills, like you have to wait and see what it's doing and then maybe fail, and get killed, insta-killed. Like, just make it easy to succeed so they can show you the cool thing they want to show you. Like, for the QTEs. I think that would be, I mean, if that's their goal, then they're really hampering it by making you repeat. when you fail. Like, I don't know, there's the skill challenge of it is so not interesting. But I guess that's, what we were figuring out at the time. That there were, it's a hard thing to figure out how to do. And these were still a fairly new mechanic for this sort of thing. And I think this is just, we sort of talked about it last time. It's just not a particularly great example of it. So yeah, that's a good point. The other funny thing was this like weird crane section, which I found really funny. It sort of was similar to the El Gigantes, where there were the two of them, where it's like, okay, you're supposed to do one of them with this specific way, like do the claw game, pick them up and throw them into the trash compactor, basically. What a weird little section. Like, you can see them all down there, and they like sort of run towards behind the dumpsters and things like that, and then you pick one of them up and they're like, oh no, what, we should rush the control tower instead, and they all come running up to you, so you only get to do one. Maybe if you're quick enough you could do a couple, but like, what a strange thing.
This section had a lot of custom sections.
A lot of individual things.
There was also the tractor, which I guess is like the mine car.
Oh, right. Yeah. Where that's the one you were specifically referencing. Yeah. Where she's driving. Yeah. Well, man, what a weird.
And the fact that she's like, I got this. And she jumps in and starts driving this.
I got my license last summer. I'm ready.
That's funny. She just does it so nonchalantly. And then, and there's, essentially that was like, they're doing another mine car kind of situation. So, which was another sort of trope of the time too, sort of on rails shooter sequences. So you could really control the action aspects of it and the destruction aspects. So I can see the logic of how they got there, but I was surprised that they went so far, and then, with all
I actually died at part of that once, because they got her, because it's where she stops and you have to go through the switch to raise the elevator or whatever.
And they got her.
They jumped down from the other side. I went up one side, not knowing that there were a bunch coming the other way, and they got down to her and got into the truck before I could get back down to her. It was actually, once I knew that they were going to come from both sides, it was fairly easy to do, but it was sort of like, oops. I think actually I shot her again. That was another case where I got up behind and I had like the shotgun, which was not a good choice, or maybe even the Punisher, which would have gone through the body and into her. Like, she's a, she's a paper kite or something, when you're doing it. But, so if you hit her at all, it's over. And I just got, I didn't really think that through. Fired straight through Ganado at her. But it was, that was fine. I actually, didn't mind those sequences at all. They were, they mixed things up a little bit. It was like, oh, it's kind of a shooting gallery. If you can, get a look ahead, you might be able to shoot them so they fall down in front of the truck, and then they're going to fall behind. And occasionally she's stopping to like chew through some wall, so you kill a bunch of them there. Maybe you can get some more ammo. Like, it was all pretty well. Like, you could see a lot of production values in things like that, where they really thought through, like, okay, well, we need to be, but it feels systemic, right? It's like, well, they're going to drop a certain amount of ammo, so you'll be depleting some, but you're going to be able to get some back, but you might have to jump out to try to get it. You have to make sure you're back on the truck. Like, there's a lot of back and forth that really is interesting friction there. I think that works pretty well. So,
yeah, I didn't mind it. I was more surprised by the fact that they went so far with them, in this. I think they're just sort of in the sort of in the thesis of sort of why this game is so important. And we talk about it from a third person shooter perspective and its influence. I guess I still thought that there was going to be plenty of a focus on the Resident Evil / survival horror side of it, and it just ended up being a lot more actiony than I thought it was going to be, which was a good palate cleanser for sure. I like the survival horror aspects more, but they're definitely good. It was good and impressive. It makes the game way more impressive to have the sequences. So, it leans
into that more power fantasy, like they're building to here, right? I mean, you've got you're in the back of this truck and you're just mowing them down coming at you. But it also, like, there's definitely, like, I don't know, 28 days later kind of energy to that, because they're moving quicker, because they're running after this truck. And like, so there's all of that going on, you're getting this opportunity to see them just mown down, both by you and then later by the helicopter, where you just have these just massive amounts of, ganados getting shot up in cutscenes in that latter case. But here you're doing it yourself, which is kind of, you're really getting that moment in a way that I thought worked pretty well. So yeah, that's a good one. We should talk about it and the being in the cages, which is so random. Like, I don't understand why there would be these caged cargo containers. Like, what? None of it makes a lot of sense if you think about it. Like, why would this be here? But it was a cool set piece. So I definitely burned a lot of ammo on that thing trying to deal with it inside in close quarters. It was very terrifying in close quarters, I thought. So.
For sure. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, when all of them have fallen down, you see the chains kind of dangling there all by themselves, which was kind of a neat visual. But I assume they're just like loading from that chasm that's below. They're loading stuff or something. Maybe that who knows? But I feel like that was definitely like a level designer's design that they'd had to art up later and had no idea what they were going to do, with art wise. We could just do crates, containers, because there's no, the locked doors and all that kind of stuff is definitely weird. But the funny thing is I actually approached it differently, I guess, because what I ended up doing was I guess what I was my resource sink in that section was actually health, because I actually didn't try to do much damage to it. I just would try to run by it and then do the QTEs to dodge. And so obviously it would slash at me and hit me occasionally. So I would, take damage. And then I would just quickly shoot the things as much as I could, as quickly as I could find them, the lights. So I didn't actually waste a lot of ammo in it. I assume you can kill the thing in that sequence if you really
I don't know about that. That seemed unlikely to me. I think it's I mean, after I got to the other side, I was like, oh, that was probably a bunch of wasted effort. Like, I shouldn't have blown those bullets on it, was my feeling. Maybe. I think you're supposed to kind of like lure it past the barrels and stuff like that in the next area, because there's a couple of explosive barrels when you're back on sort of dry land, as it were.
Yeah. I was only saying that because that one, we found out that one in the
with the liquid nitrogen.
Yeah, with the liquid nitrogen,
but I think you were supposed to do it with all the liquid nitrogen, and after I missed one, I was like, oh, there goes my chance, and that's when I gave up on it. So, I think you can probably. I mean, who knows? There's probably somebody who has killed it, in there. But it didn't feel like, or it felt like the difficulty would be high enough that I was like, I don't want to try to do that.
Well, at the end of the game, you unlock unlimited rocket launcher or something.
Yeah,
I feel like that's a new game plus kind of thing. So it's like, I can imagine going through the game.
And another looked like another handgun, maybe.
Another handgun, looked like a super stable handgun, which the game could do with for sure. Although the Red 9 fully upgraded with the stock definitely for me was the way to go, because it was pretty darn stable. Not perfect, but so that was a weird section.
Moving from the GameCube to the PS4 was just like, oh, this is way easier. So I actually didn't mind it at all. Even with the Punisher kind of moving around a bit, I was like, no, I can handle this. It's much easier.
On the GameCube, does that mean you were aiming with the C stick? The yellow, is that? No,
you aim with the.
Oh, that's right, because that's right. It's not dual stick. It's not dual stick, right? No. So, how funny. Yeah, what a weird.
Yep.
But then what else? Boss wise, I guess we talked about Krauser already. It was fine. Just too QTE heavy. in my fully upgraded Red 9, I was just shooting him in the knee over and over again.
Yeah. Well, yeah, he shields himself with his arm.
Yeah.
So you gotta shoot low. And I went through a ton of ammo on him. Not because I was missing it, just because he was absorbing it. I was probably pretty low to begin with. But it was, yeah, I mean, I didn't love the dodging there either. But I got good enough at it. Like, I think I died to him once there, maybe twice. Because I forgot that it was going to be a dodge thing. This was the game I was thinking of. I mentioned in pre-show to you, where it's the end. I just wasn't Wesker. I was remembering it as Wesker, but it's because the Resident Evil stuff means nothing to me. Like, I have no idea who any of the characters are, or any of the wider story or what's going on. And I'll forget all of the stuff I learned from this, 10 minutes after we finish recording the podcast. Cause it just doesn't land with me. I'm like, okay, whatever, soap opera. It's not, yeah, I know.
I could totally see. He even mentions Wesker. I mean, he talks about Umbrella.
He mentions it. Yeah. And I probably just got caught up on that. Like, yeah.
For someone who doesn't care about Wesker, I can see you.
Yeah, just slotting it in. Yeah, I mean, Krauser, this was the only time I've ever seen him. I'm sure he shows up in another game, but I haven't played whatever game that is, so I don't know him. So
yeah, Leon mentions that Ashley or somebody asks him about Krauser, and he says something like,
he's a good guy gone bad or something.
Yeah, or he's like, it's part of my history that I can't forget or something like that. And so, but I maybe in 2, because wasn't that Leon's
I guess, yeah,
chapter?
that's his. I think that's him. Yeah. So
yeah,
I don't know. Moody long-haired boy.
He definitely didn't have as much buildup as the others, I thought, which I felt like was missing for Krauser. Like, he's introduced at the very end of the last chapter, but you talk to Sadler way more until you meet him a few times. And they definitely have some protracted conversations through cinematics and stuff. So you get to know him a little bit, but I think they leaned a little bit on him being somebody you should know.
Right.
And sort of like the surprise cameo of him showing up at all. But not knowing who he was, I feel like, he didn't have enough buildup. It didn't have as much good buildup as the others did.
Yeah, I don't think you can leave your build up in the other game. I don't you have to to connect the dots on that stuff for sure.
Especially for this one being a sort of not a reboot, but it's like a fresh start in a way, especially from a gameplay perspective. And then on a contrast, I feel like Sadler, we've been seeing Sadler from the very beginning, and his boss fight, to be honest, was not that, it didn't feel, for me, it didn't pay off as far as we finally meet him. The design was okay. The location was random as far as I could tell. Why are we on this construction site? Really?
Yeah.
And it didn't have the sort of okay, this is the big bad.
This location's missing some connective tissue as far as that goes. Why is that location a thing? Why are they? Yeah. I mean, I guess the building up the defenses makes some sense.
It might have been mentioned in a note or something, but
yeah, it's possible that these things were talked about. But yeah, I would agree. This construction, I can't fit it into my brain. I mean, it's just an opportunity to have more sort of go press the button at the right time events. They're not QTEs, but they sort of are. It's hit the button, see the cutscene, see the crane whip around and hit him with a bunch of, I don't know, I-beams or something, which is cool and looks neat and everything, but it's not well motivated.
I just assumed, based on his character in the buildup, I assumed that we would fight him in a temple or something, I don't know, Cthulhu-esque or some.
Well, you sort of do with Krauser, right? I mean,
that was a much more appropriate section. Yeah. Just because he's in robes, and he's all ritualistic. Sadler is and everything, and it just felt weird. But
I did like about his design that the thing exploded out of his neck or whatever, and then like just his whole body was still hanging down. I kind of like that.
Yeah, that was pretty funny. Yeah, or when he starts the transformation, he just opens his mouth and there's a big eye inside. That was, it's like, whoa, where'd that come from? That was pretty funny. So I mean, it's memorable. They're memorable sequences, and again, I think rightly so. They don't take themselves too seriously in this one, which I think is the way to go for this just ridiculous franchise. And then, I think 5, they kind of stay there okay, other than the very, the poor decisions they made in certain other ways. But yeah, I haven't played beyond 5.
But tonally, yeah.
Tonally, I mean, yeah.
Yeah. I feel like 7 is going, a little bit darker again, and like, yeah.
That's what I've heard.
Felt that way to me.
I've heard about it.
Yeah, I did play it. I mean, it goes full on crazy at the end. It's definitely a power fantasy at the end, and not a disempowerment thing, but it really goes there. It really goes literally big, I should say. And that's the one I've played. I don't think I played 6 at all. I don't know. I can't recall.
People seem to want to forget about 6. Yeah,
I've definitely got some gaps. I'm just like, I'm not sure I finished 5. Like, I don't know. Yeah, I have no idea. So anyway,
but then we have a jet ski.
Then we have the jet ski. So I will repeat my pre-show story about the jet ski. Okay, so I guess I got down to the jet ski. I had about, a minute and 41 seconds and maybe, 42 milliseconds. Not that I saw that number a lot of times because I replayed it 7 or 8 times. But I did. And the reason that I had to replay it a number of times was that I kept getting close to the end where the waves start catching up with you. Like there's a section where like, I guess there's a big earthquake and like the island's collapsing or whatever. And so there's this huge rush of water. It's a very like, the water is chasing you out. And if it catches you, oh no. So you have to push forward on the stick and accelerate. And I'd always get like to the last couple of, falling rocks and like steer to go around them. And the wave would catch up with me. And I'm like, man, this is ridiculous. Like, I'm not like, I'm pushing full. I'm not wildly turning. I don't know that you could even. I'm like, this is really, really, really bad. And then I was like, oh no. And I switched my controller for another controller. And I found that, turns out that controller I've been using to play the whole game does not have quite the same range in its outputs as this new controller in my hands does. And I did it in one try. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Like,
wow. Yeah,
it was something. It's like
we all account for that stuff.
As a programmer, like every time you look at the specs on the controllers, they're like, okay, well, you have this much precision, blah, 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 whatever. However, make sure you have a dead zone of at least 0.25, like, a quarter of the resolution of the thing, or, maybe 0.2. So a fifth to a quarter of the resolution, they're like that you're going to lose on the low end because the dead zones are just notoriously terrible. Because there's not a lot of fine control near the center of the stick, oddly. But you also lose it from the extent. So if like when you push it full left, full right, full up or down, you also lose that on older hardware, on older controllers that have been through some stuff. They don't get wider. They tend to always get narrower. So this thing was just out beyond the range. Like it was fine if I pushed full up, but if I pushed slightly left or right from full up, it was not getting as much out of it as it should have been. So that's a controller that probably has a constrained x-axis or whatever. It's just not putting out enough. The controller should be possible through the hardware to just recalibrate your controllers, which used to be a thing and it isn't anymore. I think it's because they just want you to buy another controller when your controller gets crappy. And they're like $50. So I see why they want you to buy another one. And yeah, I was like, man, like after I did it a bunch of times and kept dying at the same place, I'm like, this is not me. at this point. I'm not missing anything. This is not complicated. And I switched to an apparently newer controller and was like, oh, look at that. First time.
Yeah, that's
not a good way. Not a good way to end the game.
No, that's crazy. I mean, it's a great example.
Yeah, I was gonna say at least I had Ashley, proposition me. So that.
Oh my God! Yeah, with a rainbow.
Yeah,
I mean, it's It's too bad too because with all the campiness that came with it, to have that be the decision for the last moments, it's like that's where you go with everything that happened, it's like just yikes.
Yeah, and she's gonna pay you for it. Oh God.
Yeah, and I mean, what's the age difference there? And just like so many. Bad. Yeah, but then the rainbow off to the suns into the sunset, and it's all quite a memorable ending for good and bad reasons. But the controller thing is it's just a great example of how hardware is something that still comes into play. You can't forget, right, about aspects like, especially consoles. And there's all sorts of other things with PCs, which makes compatibility a nightmare. But it's like, no, you gotta think about all that kind of stuff. And again, that's where QA comes in. It's a really critical aspect of any game being good or not. So.
One thing I will say is that that Nintendo hardware has always been sturdier with the controllers, until actually the Switch. But historically, the NES and
that's a good point.
And that maybe, and my GameCube controllers are still fine. I wish I still had the wireless one, whatever that was called. That it just like it stopped transmitting to the base.
The Wavebird.
No, with the Wavebird, the Wavebird was super
great
cool.
Controller.
It was a great controller, and they've held up perfectly well. Like I can play games with them, and they have no issues. So it's possible that in the original hardware was like, oh, why would you check? And then, but when you're porting it, you gotta take some banged up old controllers that have weird issues with them and be like, there are people that have these controllers out there. We want their game to be finishable by them as well. I would have been very frustrated had it been the only controller in the house. So it was.
You might not have finished.
I would not have finished. I don't think it was possible to finish with that controller.
Yeah. Oh man, so something else.
Yeah. It was really a bit much. Okay.
And then, so there was the credits. Did you watch the credits?
I did. I always watch the credits.
What the hell? It's like this story time about the village and how they had a nice tranquil life of playing guitar and eating at the table, and then all of a sudden this guy comes to town who wants to it's I guess a prophet or something, or a priest, which I guess is Sadler, and then now he's injecting monsters into people and everyone runs away, and then that's the end of the story. It's like, it's such a funny but the art, it was just such a weird, I guess there's a little bit of precedence with the sort of precedent with the notes you find and some of the artwork on the walls and stuff, but it's like it's a storybook telling of how we got here or how the village got there, which was, I don't know, it was kind of interesting, and I thought the art was nice. And then there's the post-credit scene, which is again a freaking like, what? You have a post-credit scene and this is what you do with it? You take off Huntingdon's or whatever the hell her name is. You take off her glasses and then harass her. I mean, it's like, oh my God. It's just like, at least Kojima has intrigue, and I mean, he has ridiculous post-credit scenes too, but they're at least
and issues with women.
And issues with women, yeah, for sure. And he puts those front and center. He doesn't wait till the credit scene. He does it in the middle of the game. But anyway, yeah, it's just such a weird, just and ending in a bit of a whimper, and unfortunately in those two cases.
Yeah. I would have been fine with just like, Ada steals the vial and you walk over to the cliff and look out into the sunset and the game ends. That would have been enough for me. I get what they're doing, and like it is good to sort of let the player have this sort of last heroic thing, but if it doesn't work out, and then to kind of, finish off the way it does, you're like, oh, okay, well that happened. So yeah, some missteps here at the end. Endings are hard, but I don't know. don't add one that's not worth it for sure. Anyway,
but overall, I mean, it's
overall strong chapter. I did enjoy almost everything in here. I liked a lot of it. The QTE stuff was not great, but
it felt like a great crescendo.
A lot of settings, a lot of changes and a lot of different sort of settings, some narrative points that just don't land, like poor Mike, who I never had heard of before, now never will really get to know. Dang, I guess I'll get my own beer. I don't know how you're supposed to react to that, like character you haven't really met. I mean, clearly Leon knows him, but it's like, oh, okay, gotcha. Anyway,
I'm looking up to see. I wanted to see if Mike is like a thing or not.
Mike actually gets reconstructed and becomes the helicopter in Deus Ex.
He might be in Revelations. No, but it doesn't look like. Yeah. Anyway,
I'm looking to see if he. Nope, he only appears in Resident Evil 4.
Oh yeah, right. Yeah, there it is.
I'm looking in the Resident Evil wiki. Mike died 2004. Was an American helicopter pilot.
Killed in action. Wow. But the fact that he has his own entry on this wiki page is impressive.
Yeah. Yeah. Though not visible in the cutscene, third-party modding tools have revealed that Mike has his own model inside the helicopter.
yeah, I see that. That's so funny.
Wow.
Mike lives on. Yeah.
Mike lives on. Thanks to the modders. The modders have given Mike his due. And now let's give RE4 its final due. We are here to do takeaways. We should grab this up because it's getting late. We've got half an hour to go, but I don't even think we're going to have time for feedback. We're already past an hour. So let's just jump right into them. Oh, actually, there is one thing to do before that. I'm glad I remembered. And that's Brett's book recommendation.
Yeah, let's do it.
So I had another one in mind today, and it didn't really have any good ties at all. And I was like, I'm sure I can come up with something better, but nothing's coming to me. But I looked back through my sort of recent reading, and I came across I think it came out last year, a book by Silvia Morena Garcia. Got a lot of critical praise, actually. A book called Mexican Gothic. And I picked it because of both the setting. It's set in Mexico. It's sort of got a sort of late Victorian era, maybe Depression era, but there's sort of like the sort of still remaining wealth and all of that sort of feel to it. It feels very Gothic. I mean, it's well titled. It is more of a, feels like more of a haunting story in a lot of ways, but I would say that especially at the end, it has some very similar things going on as with the Las Plagas. Once you finally realize what's going on towards the end of the book, you're like, oh man, that's creepy. It's different, but it's quite a good book. I would totally recommend it to anyone who likes horror. She's definitely one to watch. Silvia Morena Garcia. I read another book by her that was an earlier book, also quite good. But this one really was really quite good. Very thrilling. Definitely had a whole voice and tone, and got to see sort of the impact of colonialism as well, and like the way wealth is made. Sort of great wealth is made, by resources and capital, etc. So there's a lot to like about it. So I totally recommend it. That again is Mexican Gothic by Silvia Morena Garcia. Well worth a read if you're interested.
Nice.
Now let's turn to the important part, which is takeaways. I will, of course, give it to you first, sir. What's your first one?
My first one, I think I can keep these all pretty short because we've talked about them all at nauseum. My first one I was just calling commitment to design tension. And that was our point on the concept of gun and run, which I think we coined on this series. And the simple example, which I've given before, is that they did some of this in RE1, but I think, and thus I'm sure 2 and 3, but the tank controls and in RE1, they had the camera, obviously the camera element of the design tension for a survival horror game. And in this, the camera, is obviously, because it's, heralded as one of the, if not the first third person shooter, that the camera's attached to you, but they do a great job of having that simple decision of not being able to move and shoot, and forcing you to stay still while you're shooting, and then having to run only when you're not. And that was sort of like it was a sort of a revelation, in my opinion, on finding a different way to achieve that tension that they got in the previous games, but allow the camera to be more natural. And obviously it takes out some of the cinematic aspects, but I think it makes it a more immersive experience because you still feel, you're still close to the character, and the camera's not some unrealistic camera angle out of the upper corner of a room that you just entered. So just that the tension that they, and some of those simple decisions that they made, though they may not have known it at the time, I think were quite brilliant. So yeah, gun and run. So what about you?
Yeah, I mean, I knew that would be your number one. It was also my number one. I will add to that what I really appreciate about it more than anything else is the pacing and rhythm that it lends the combat. These sort of like, I'm going to stop, I'm going to deliberately take a couple shots, I'm going to do my level best to do something good with those shots, and maybe follow it up with an awesome action like a kick or something like that, or a suplex. But then I'm going to move away. I'm going to get some distance. I'm going to run. I am faster than they are, and I think that rhythm of just like, that's definitely a push me pull you kind of situation of like, okay, I got to stop and do a thing. I'm going to be latched here, but then I know I'm going to want to move as quickly as I can after that and get to another position, where I can get a little distance and make the most of those shots again. I think that all works tremendously well. And I just would want to echo that, as well as everything you have to say about it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so good. It's so simple. And it's so like when you play it, you're like, of course this is what you do. But yep. I can only imagine them going through development. As we know, this game was sort of restarted a couple times, or at least once. And so finding that magic is not easy. And so it's cool. It's quite a neat thing. Is my second?
Yep.
My second one, I didn't really have a good way to put it, but what I put down was sort of the concept that you can have a linear, essentially hall crawl game combined with small sandboxes and have it work really well. Because I really did, of course, I try to have one of my takeaways always have something to do with level design. And so I really did underappreciate this when I had played the game in previous times. And again, I hadn't gotten past the castle or through much of the castle previously. But to be honest, like the opening village is still maybe one of the better examples of this concept. And luckily they present you with it right away, where you're like, this is different. This is village area, which is really just like 5 or 6 buildings, in kind of an open area. It's not really that big, and that's why I call it a small sandbox. But but they just the ebb and flow of sort of like pushing you through hallways and then having a little, little hub, and then pushing you through hallways and having another little section. It just was it provided a great pacing to a game that was, at least from RE1's perspective, generally just going through hallways, right? And not having these sort of arenas of combat. And I think the AI was a testament to it. The systems that they do have in there, like even location based hitting, shots to the enemies, and then sort of the ladders and all the different little things that they did to make a little sandbox interesting. But it worked. It was fine, right? You can still control and have some amount of control of pacing in those sandbox areas with the way that they design the levels, multi-platform, one-way thing, one-way areas, jumping down ladders, etc. So I was really appreciative of that combination.
Did your favorite place end up being that that second pathway through? You had really talked about.
Yeah, I think that was probably one of the rare ones. There was a one in chapter 5 that I'm trying to think of that was also pretty good. There was the reason that one I think will continue to be the best one for me is because it had the old ladders. Because then later through 4 and 5, many of the ladders fixed, are fixed, and so that's. I mean, it seems like a simple, dumb thing, but it's actually pretty significant because you have agency in the level design flow. If you can be clever and get up there before them and then knock them down, and you can basically control the flow of combat a little bit because you can jump down. Well, I guess they can jump down too, but they can't. They have to anyway. Yeah, so that's probably still my favorite.
Cool. I will go, you mentioned it briefly there, but I will say the AI, we talked a lot about it, so I'm not going to belabor it, but the way, honestly, the fodder, the way that the really Ganados move and like bob and weave and sometimes run at you, or throw things at you, and like the tells that they have that they're going to do that, like you have some time to react. And of course the controls it all ties in together. It's very holistic how it all is made to feel, but a big part of that is how much reaction they have. I mean, they're able to push them into like where they're running after this truck later in the game, and it feels totally like, oh yeah, of course they can do that, right? It doesn't feel like a new thing that they can do. It's just like, oh, this is a thing that they could do. We just didn't have the spaces for them to do it, and now they're in these sort of long tunnel we're driving a truck through, and now they can just run at me. So there's just the whole how they all play is great, and I'll echo the space stuff because they really change up, it works in close spaces, in bigger spaces, more like plain open spaces, but even like these sort of, connected corridor spaces, like the town is basically topologically mostly just like, I mean, I guess inside the houses is sort of like a space, but like a lot of it is just like, this is a loop connected to another loop, connected to a third loop, right? I mean, it's like a very badly baked pretzel or something, but, in terms of the places you can run, but like that just
a very badly baked pretzel, the level design for Resident Evil 4.
There you go.
Brett Duville.
That's my article. That's my blog post. But the enemy AI handles all of that really, really well, and you still feel pressured by them. But like you have agency, as you pointed out, that's in the level design. So I think it's that those things go really, really well together, and the AI would have been a real hard thing to do at the time, to do it this well. So they really clearly put some energy into it. I looked at the credits, and I think it's like, 7 or 8 programmers for the whole game, which is also just like, nicely done. I mean, I know they shared an engine for all of this stuff, and I don't know to what degree like this and a number of the other Capcom 5 games were sharing a lot of code. I mean, you can definitely see Killer 7 in this. Like I said earlier. So, but even so, like a lot rested on those guys, and they did a great job. And whoever did the AI stuff in particular, I think is fantastic. So,
yep, agreed.
Yep,
glad you mentioned that one.
Got one more for me?
Yeah, and we definitely hit this one a lot in this episode because we were talking about ammo stuff. But I basically just kind of boil it down to the art of tuning and balancing and pacing. Because now that I've finished the game and played the whole thing and seen the arc of balancing and tuning for the game, and we debated, and the dynamic difficulty aspects that they might have in there. And I think I said it a few episodes ago or a couple times of just sort of a fairly frictionless game to play, though, which is weird to say for a survival horror, which you would assume is a lot about dying and a lot about restarting and a lot of about, being scared and tense all the time. Those things happened, and I definitely felt the tension, but the most important thing you want from these games is to almost die all the time. You don't actually want to die. You want to be on the cusp of dying and feel tense the whole time, but not actually do it a lot. And they did that, and it's just magic. This game is so well balanced and tuned. And I mean, again, coming from a development standpoint, which is, I guess, the point of this podcast, like, that is not easy. That is not easy to do. It is very difficult. And people
and tiny things that you change or little additions that you make to your mechanics can drastically change your game.
Yeah.
And now you've got to rebalance the whole thing, or take that thing out, which you almost never want to do, which is a sunk cost fallacy often. But, so that you're fighting those things as well of as you're developing it, you have to constantly be rebalancing it. It's kind of remarkable.
Yeah, and it's not, and I definitely don't want to be preachy to players who are non-developers out there, but I do think it's an underappreciated aspect from players that, players obviously know this game is good, and we've had a lot of good people write in about that, and so it's not lost on anybody. But I think that any time that we can promote sort of the behind the scenes, black magic of development that players may not always think about, because balancing and tuning is such an art form, and it is really, really difficult. And when it goes well, it's good, but you can't kind of always put your finger on why it feels good versus a game that feels bad. Usually players would just kind of boil it down to, oh, that was too hard or that was too easy. But it's just, there's so much going on in this game to achieve what it did. And at least, and for both of us, and arguably anyone who's played the game and finished it, for everyone to have probably a pretty similarly feeling experience, regardless of how they dynamically tuned the difficulty, is just, it's just a feat for sure. So,
yeah, I mean, there's a number of points to talk about there. I mean, one is, we talked with Julian Gollop about how, the fact that we're being successful at his game with its dynamic balancing might have been making the game punishing for ourselves. So there was that with the original XCOM. Soren Johnson talked a lot about how how out of balance Civ was, and it was only after multiple basically releases, patches, etc., that they were able to hone in on the balance that we played, right? But which leads me to my third point, which is, of course, they were doing it with discs that they were mailing people. My third point, though, was we're now in the era of live service games where you see a lot of that balancing happening sort of out, in the open, because it's continuing to be balanced after it ships. To get this right on a thing you couldn't change is, to me, the magic, right? I mean, it's shipped on these little mini discs for the GameCube. There were two of them, in fact. And it has to be right the first time, and it is a little harder on the GameCube, I will admit, but not so much harder. And those sections that I did play on there was for the most part, really worked. It was only that one section where I was like, okay, I've had enough. If it's going to get tougher, and I think that's as much about me now that I'm, out of my 20s, and have slowed down a little bit, that I'm just not as able to do it as well, because I did it back in the day when it came out. So yeah, I would point to that as well. I guess my final thing would be pushing your game further, but not too far. They add these RPG mechanics, but they're not crazy amount of RPG mechanics. They add, there's not some huge skill tree or something like that. they add, like, you're not playing different versions of Leon, for example. You know, as we said, they you know, move to this more action-based gameplay, but it is still like tank controls. You know, it is, you know, you can't move while you're aiming, and, you know, like, so there are, like,
you can buy weapons but not ammo.
Right, you can buy weapons but not ammo is another great one. Like, it's like they still have that resource constraint, you know, and a lot of the other elements that are from the series that, you know, maybe are starting to not make as much sense at this time are still there, like the examining things on the walls and having it say goofy stuff about it or whatever, you know, like, I don't know how necessary that stuff really is, you know, at that day and age, you know, a good decade out from the original. I think that's all finding a real sweet spot of, like, bringing your fans in, you know, to something new, keeping it familiar for them, but also not straining it so far that it's no longer the thing that they loved. I think, you know, it's a real triumph that, you know, this and RE1 are both so beloved, you know, because they feel so different to play, you know, and I think, you know, that's a real testament, you know, to the development of the game, that it really just, it's very recognizably Resident Evil, you know.
Yeah,
but it's also you know, a different thing. It's not all the way to Metal Gear, you know, or whatever, you know, where it's a lot more fluid or something like that. So, you know, it's still wielding that knife is a tricky thing.
Right. You
know, you're not just going to carve up, you know, a bunch of ganados. That's a recipe for disaster. So you really have to be working, you know, with the other aspects we talked about. So it does, you know, we often talk about the sort of holism of design. And I think that this one just nails it on so many ways and stays true to its lineage while really pushing not only its genre but games generally forward. So it's an impressive thing. Yeah. It's lightning in a bottle sort of game, I think. So
yeah, totally. Yeah, that's a good point. That's a great one. I definitely take it from somebody who has worked on reboots or spiritual reboots. In a couple of cases, like, it is finding that balance of what to keep and what to change for a franchise that is as storied as Resident Evil. You know, this definitely is nails it as far as an example of taking on that challenge, which is really, really difficult to do. Yeah, for sure. And still have the fans who love the franchise happy. And in fact, in this case, I think probably happier. You know, that it was the right things to change and leaving generally the right things behind. So yeah, it's a good one.
Yep, for sure. All right, well, that is our series on Resident Evil 4. We do have emails that we'll be getting to in the future, but we are longer than we normally like to go. So we are going to set them aside. Our apologies, because we do really like to engage with them, but there are some questions coming up and things like that. So I want to make sure they get their due. We would be rushing through them so that Tim can stream. So, of course, we love to get reviews through generally the Apple Podcast app, but really whatever app you use, listen to our podcasts. And you can reach us via email at devgameclub@gmail.com. I reply to every email. There are occasionally things that don't make sense to read on the show, but in general, I like to read and answer on the show as well. Of course, you can find us on the web at devgameclub.com or on Twitter at devgameclub. You can also find my co-host at
Tim Longo Jr. with a JR at the end.
And you are still streaming Control, I assume?
Yeah, unfortunately, yeah. It's been dragging out. I've missed a handful of days in the process. So, right. I am. I took holiday stuff last week, so I did take last week off again. But still going. I don't really know how far in I am. I'm about to do the ashtray maze finally, so we'll see what that yields. But I don't know. I feel like I'm getting there. I have all the powers.
Yeah, I think you're like a quarter of the way now. So
okay, great.
No, I'm kidding. There is some wild stuff coming up that will be. I'm curious to see how you feel about it. So I look forward to hearing it. Let's see. Our intro and outro music was written and performed by Kirk Hamilton, commissioned by friend of the cast, Aaron Evers, and our logo, of course, is by Mark Garcia. Also, check the Twitter for another good shot. Have fun firing your infinite rocket launcher this week, and good night.
Nice one. Good night.